Thousands of people would like to know who really created Bitcoin.
So who made Bitcoin? When you ask about the creator, who created this, who invented this, they must be a real genius. Everyone's like, we have no idea.
Were you able to learn anything more about who Satoshi Nakamoto is?
No.
You're taking a look at Bitcoin in full rally mode today.
You're right about that, Romaine. At this point, Bitcoin is up about 20%, if you can believe it. And over the last 13 trading days, only one down day. Look at that. It's really pretty incredible. 71%. The bulls clearly in charge.
Hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey, hey.
After collecting over $1 billion of people's investments, just fucking disappeared into the wind.
Now, you did not lose $30,000, okay? Everyone, listen up. You didn't lose your money. Now, you have your... Technically, you kind of lost your money.
Most likely, it's a fictitious name. I don't know him.
Have you ever
No.
corresponded by email?
No. I don't even know his name or person.
By now, just about everyone has heard about Bitcoin. It's a household name, and in the short span of a decade, cryptocurrency as a term has gone from obscurity all the way to the mainstream. The creation of Bitcoin has fostered this entirely new world of financial discussion, and to this day, blockchain technology seeks to undermine a number of industries in the future. Whether you're a fan of the whole Bitcoin thing or not, there is one thing almost all of us can agree on. Bitcoin is legendary for the sheer number of insane stories that come out of its existence. The first story that comes to mind for me with Bitcoin is the tale of the Gizmodo editor who threw away a hard drive with 7,500 Bitcoin on it. This is both absolutely hilarious and tragic simultaneously. By the time he realized it, he had thrown away $7.5 million. And today it's worth around $54 million. On the flip side of things, you might be all too familiar with the stories of the Bitcoin millionaires who made good on their initial investments and held long enough that the words moon and Lambo had a new meaning. All in all, Bitcoin as a whole has fostered this incredibly interesting community. But when it comes to Bitcoin, the most infamous story you've probably heard of is the rise and fall of the BitConnect Ponzi scheme. We've all seen the bald dude yelling BitConnect, and in all honesty, this topic deserves a video of its own. Time and time again, we've seen scandals of YouTubers promoting things that are less than stellar, and these are obviously in exchange for those sweet influencer dollars. It's one thing to promote YouTuber merchandise that's going to end up in all of the thrift stores in a couple of decades from now, but selling your audience a Ponzi scheme that led to the loss of people's life savings is just another insane story from the Bitcoin realm. The list goes on, and on my channel previously, we've only scratched the surface of the stories of the various darknet marketplaces and services, all stemming from Bitcoin's creation. All in all, I must say, the cryptocurrency community fascinates me with the Twitter pump and dumps, blackmail emails, and major Bitcoin exchanges getting hacked. There's so much chaos in the world of cryptocurrency that I can only really describe it as the Wild West. But don't get it twisted, I still believe that Bitcoin and blockchain technology is a great invention. Whenever there's something new and there's hype around it, it takes time for it to grow out of its infancy. We all know Bitcoin by now, but despite us knowing all about it, there is one thing that none of us know. At the heart of Bitcoin's genesis, there is one internet mystery that is just as grand a story as all of the others. That mystery is the true identity of the creator of Bitcoin, and it begins with one elusive online persona. As many of you know already, that certain identity is Mr. Satoshi Nakamoto. In the 21st century, it's practically impossible to have a global impact without at least putting your name out there. Yet Satoshi Nakamoto is an exception. By all accounts, the person behind this online persona was a genius, and to this day, no one knows who he is or what happened to him. Satoshi Nakamoto is a pseudonym, which is a fictitious name, and this name is the author of the now famous white paper by the name of Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Satoshi was the catalyst to the creation of Bitcoin, along with the help of various developers over time, but to this day, not a sliver of verifiable proof as to his real identity has been revealed. The person behind this identity is believed to have been ahead of his time and had a comprehensive understanding of C++ coding, economics, and cryptography. This unnamed billionaire is believed to be the owner of about 1 million Bitcoin that has remained untouched to this day. Something I should note is that this 1 million number is a bit of a rumor. It's widely speculated that much of the unspent coins within the first year of Bitcoin's mining belong to Satoshi. I would say that it's very likely that Satoshi owns a large sum, but it's incredibly difficult to say exactly how much Bitcoin Satoshi has stashed away. This mysterious identity came out of nowhere and has thus created non-stop speculation in regards of what type of person could have been behind Bitcoin. You might think that the creator of Bitcoin would have some endgame where they would profit off of it, yet Satoshi's actions thus far have pointed in the opposite direction. Not a single penny of this supposed fortune has ever been touched, and due to the nature of how public blockchain transactions work, we would know if this were to change at any given moment. There are quite a few theories about why Satoshi hasn't spent any of his fortune, so I'll take some time now to address some common theories. Some people believe that Satoshi is waiting for the perfect time to cash out, while some optimists believe that Satoshi never intends on selling his fortune as a donation to the community. There's a chance that Satoshi lost access to his Bitcoin, which I will explain in more detail later. Some people believe that Satoshi Nakamoto is dead, while others believe he wanted to retain his anonymity. As we go forward, I will elaborate on all of these theories much more. I must say that this Satoshi debate has gone on for quite some time, and by no means is this topic new. Many people have done their research into this subject, but typically something I notice is that a lot of journalists who do videos or articles on this matter tend to pick a candidate and then work backwards. I should mention that we are going to go over the list of popular candidates, but for now I need to point something out. The fact of the matter is that starting with a candidate in mind creates a sort of confirmation bias and doesn't give you the full picture of the online persona of Satoshi Nakamoto. So instead, when we get to my analysis, I'd like to focus only on primary sources for evidence to try and set the record straight about what we actually know about the mysterious creator of Bitcoin. Despite the fact that Satoshi took a wide variety of steps to make sure no paper trail would lead back to him, no matter how good you are at operational security, the fact of the matter is, whenever you connect and interact online with others, what you do and say still directly gives clues to what type of person you are. Any good poker player will tell you that whenever you sit down to play at a table, every little thing you do sends information to the other players there. Whether that information is body language, decision-making, or even your word choice to the others at the table, all of these give hints towards a poker game's final outcome. In our search for the creator of Bitcoin, I'd like to collect a vast majority of the analysis on the internet and compile it together in a similar way to my poker analogy. That being said, understanding this topic requires quite a bit of background information, so bear with me. Without further ado, to start our timeline of context, I'd like to take you back to the 1980s to begin our attempts at unraveling the true identity of Satoshi Nakamoto. Despite what many people have been led to believe, the influence for the creation of Bitcoin spans way farther back in history than just 2007. The roots for the creation of Bitcoin actually take place all the way back in the late 1980s, and much of their influence can be traced back to one individual by the name of David Chaum. David Chaum was a cryptographer and computer scientist who is well known for his various contributions to the cryptographic community in and around 1982. He released a paper called Blind Signatures for Untraceable Payments. This academic paper ultimately led to the creation of a company by the name of DigiCash, an anonymous payment system. Much of David Chaum's work is what could be credited as the main influence to the activist group known as the Cypherpunks. Satoshi had knowledge of the Cypherpunk group, what it stood for, and he seemed to know many, but not all, of the popular members, but more on that later. The term cypherpunk is something that is crucial in understanding the origin of Bitcoin and who its potential creator might be, so for the sake of simplicity, I'll give you the Wikipedia definition for what a cypherpunk is. A cypherpunk is any activist advocating widespread use of strong cryptography and privacy-enhancing technologies as a route to social and political change. Originally communicating through the cypherpunks' electronic mailing list, informal groups aim to achieve privacy and security through proactive use of cryptography. To explain a bit further here, cypherpunks essentially saw ahead in time in regards to the lack of privacy found in our modern internet. Nowadays, we give up all of our info to advertisers and the government, and by now you could argue we've all just accepted that we're all being monitored. In the 1970s, though, that was a bit different, and encryption was something that was really only used by governments and spies. As these methods of encryption made their way out to the general public, cypherpunks advocated against Big Brother by promoting cryptography and other practices on an individual basis. Cypherpunks sort of wanted the average consumer to take their own online privacy into their own hands by giving them tools to do so. As you can imagine, teaching advanced cryptographic techniques to the general public and getting them to care about online privacy would be an uphill battle, as most people at the time didn't even own a home computer. This was the roots of the cypherpunks, though, and as mentioned previously, their main form of communication was a very active email list called the cryptography mailing list. You can think of this email list as a sort of precursor to an online forum, and this mailing list was so active that trolls at the time would actually sign people up on their behalf to flood their inboxes with spam. This mailing list was started around 1992 by Eric Hughes, Timothy C. May, and John Gilmore, who founded a small group that met monthly at Gilmore's company Cygnus Solutions in the San Francisco Bay Area. Here, as like-minded individuals, they would discuss a wide variety of political topics and goals that the group had in mind. As the cypherpunk community grew, the mailing list grew quickly as well to over a few thousand individuals, and over time it became an incredibly active group for discussion over the years. As the group grew further, the cypherpunks continued to play at least some role in developing a number of notable softwares over the years. Something I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go forward is that the origin of the cypherpunk group stems from California. Consider that at this time in the internet's history, you didn't have as far-reaching political activism geographically. This group grew far larger by word of mouth, more than just random strangers on the internet sharing things like we do today. We should keep in mind that the cypherpunks group influence would be strongest where this group had the most people locally. If we look at Google Trends for the term cypherpunk leading up to when Satoshi approached the group, we can see that California had the highest interest in the United States from 2004 to 2008. Satoshi had come into contact with the cypherpunks' influence at some point, and something we should consider is that there may be a chance that Satoshi may have been active under a different username prior to creating Bitcoin. Coding for Bitcoin started in 2007, according to Satoshi, so if we look at the cryptography mailing list archive, theoretically, Satoshi would have been posting previously under another name or another email account as a cypherpunk. Keep this archive in the back of your mind as I start to add more and more clues to this internet mystery. I will link the cryptography mailing list archive in the description for later use. What I really want to highlight here more than anything is that California was a hotspot for this group's activism. I know this detail might be trivial now, but as we start to dig into things, you'll understand why I pointed this detail out. As mentioned previously, the cypherpunks developed a wide variety of software. However, one thing the cypherpunks couldn't seem to be successful in developing was a digital currency, and that's where Satoshi Nakamoto comes in.
On October 31st, 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto showed what he was working on to the Cypherpunk mailing list and sought to turn the proposal into a reality. This proposal is the now famous white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Unlike most white papers that came before him, Satoshi had already started working on the project prior to writing the white paper in 2007. If you're unfamiliar with the term white paper, let me break it down for you, as there's a clue here. There are quite a few definitions for the term white paper, but in this context, it's defined as a sort of document with a guiding philosophy towards solving a problem. Satoshi's white paper was a theoretical outline for creating a decentralized currency that others before him failed to do. One of the main problems with creating a currency at this time was the double spending problem, to which I won't get into technically, but in this circumstance, Satoshi took knowledge from others' past work and applied them towards his proposal in creating the Bitcoin project. The term white paper itself is actually of British origin, and something you should consider is if we look up the Google Trends, we can see that out of any of the first world countries up until 2008 when Satoshi posted this, the term white paper had almost double the interest in the United Kingdom. To top that off, at almost every given opportunity in this white paper, he would write in British English. Throughout his various writings across all his profiles, he uses terms like checks, analyze, favor, organize, and even bloody difficult. Throughout all his writings, he never spells anything incorrectly. Though keep in mind that none of us are perfect, which means that whatever spell checking software he had at the time was correcting him in a British English. What's incredibly interesting about all of Satoshi's writing on the internet over the years is that he used 2 full spaces after a period in every single sentence. I kid you not. Go look up his forum account on Bitcoin Talk and you'll see what I'm talking about. This idiosyncrasy is found predominantly in 2 categories of people. One instance for the use of double space after a period is that of academics, as a few different college writing styles mandated the use of a double space after a period. But here's the thing. Many of these college formats have since then removed this requirement over the years. What's interesting here is that Satoshi casually used this double space after a period method to the point that it became muscle memory, which hints at this habit having been done for years. This could very well mean that Satoshi had learned to type on a typewriter instead of a keyboard, as double spacing after a period on a typewriter was required. If this is true, this gives us a major hint about his age. Many of the first popular home keyboards for personal computers that actually saw mass adoption weren't even released until 1977 with both the Apple II and the TRS-80. Typically, most schools at this time didn't have you write papers on typewriters until college, which leads me to believe that Satoshi Nakamoto is far older than he stated on one of his online profiles. On his P2P Foundation forum accounts, it states that he was born on April 5th, 1975. which by this time, it would make it far rarer that someone would grow up learning to type on a keyboard over a typewriter. Typewriters saw a pretty steep decline in popularity around 1985. Theoretically, this would make Satoshi Nakamoto 44 today if he were telling the truth. But if we factor in the possibility that Satoshi was around 16 to 18 by the time he began using a typewriter, I would estimate that he's around the age of 55 to 64. I know this is speculative, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt here, but as far as estimating his age goes, this would be my best guess. At this time, Satoshi claimed that he started working on the project since 2007 and was already well underway in making it a reality. Many people on the mailing list met this proposal with skepticism. The idea for this type of digital money was long in the heads of others before Satoshi, but the key difference here was that Mr. Nakamoto actually managed to execute on his proposal. B-Money by Wei Dai was another project that was referenced as an inspiration to Bitcoin, but never made it past a write-up. DigiCash, which barely mentioned earlier, was a proposed idea by David Chaum for anonymous payments where people could take money from a bank and then use the forms of blind cryptographic signatures to store money on their computers and pay for things anonymously. DigiCash filed for bankruptcy as the company failed to see the adoption in the 1999s due to the fact that e-commerce hadn't really taken off yet. Another project was BitGold by Nick Szabo, and this was basically the precursor to Bitcoin and was incredibly similar, but Nick Szabo never turned his BitGold into a reality. While the two projects in theory were very close, Szabo has since written on his blogs the differences and challenges he faced and how Satoshi's idea was an improvement. I won't bore you with the technical details, but you can go look them up if you're interested. Many people mention that because Nick Szabo wasn't referenced in the white paper, and that the projects were so similar that Nick Szabo was Satoshi. But as it turns out, Satoshi did credit Nick Szabo not just on the white paper, but also on his website. This seems to suggest that Satoshi Nakamoto hadn't heard about Nick Szabo until his project started to receive attention. We'll discuss the Nick Szabo theory in detail in a bit, but for now, let's get back to our timeline. Despite previously failing projects, Hal Finney decided to be the first to take Satoshi up on his proposal and began to work on the Bitcoin project for free. Hal Finney was a computer scientist and also a cypherpunk. He was pretty well known among the cypherpunk community for his work as a lead developer in the PGP Corporation. If you've ever dabbled with encryption, then you've likely heard of PGP encryption. Something I should mention is that Satoshi even looked up to Hal, but more on that later. Hal later wrote on the Bitcoin Talk forum, "When Satoshi announced Bitcoin on the cryptography mailing list, he got a skeptical reception at best. Cryptographers have seen too many grand schemes by clueless noobs. They tend to have a knee-jerk reaction. I was more positive. I had long been interested in cryptographic payment schemes. Plus, I was lucky enough to meet and extensively correspond with both Wei Dai and Nick Szabo, generally acknowledged to have created ideas that be realized with Bitcoin." As I mentioned previously, Hal worked on the Bitcoin project continuously since his first contact with Satoshi and made a fair amount of money mining the currency in the early days. January 3rd, 2009, the very first block of Bitcoin was mined, and inside this code was a hidden message. This message reading, "The Times, January 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks," which was in reference to the financial collapse of 2008 and was the headline of a United Kingdom newspaper called The Times. Once again here, we see another hint at Satoshi being British. Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin had come at the right place and the right time, and that hidden message seems to communicate strongly his intentions for creating the project. During the following years, up until late 2010, Satoshi would post regularly on the Bitcoin Talk forum and make further improvements to the Bitcoin project. He would post daily to the forums, and to this day, anyone can view his post history on his forum accounts. We're going to individually dig up these posts by Satoshi in a bit, but for now, I should bring up Satoshi's disappearance. Without any kind of regulation, it was primed to be adopted by criminals and other gray area practices. We all know what happened with the Silk Road if you watched Barely's other video, but more in regards to 2010, Another incident occurred at the time of Satoshi's disappearance. For context, in late 2010, WikiLeaks was one of the prime targets for the US government as a result of leaking countless confidential files to the public. No government likes a whistleblower, and a bounty was made on the organization. WikiLeaks was in between a rock and a hard place, as the site was hit with frequent DDoS attacks and funding was cut off as no payment processor wanted to work with them. Any company providing payment services to WikiLeaks became directly associated with them, which made them a target by the government as well. In 2010, a thread was started on the Bitcoin Talk forum that linked to an article from PCWorld.com. Keep in mind at this time, Bitcoin was still relatively unheard of. When the article titled, "Could the WikiLeaks scandal lead to the new virtual currency?" popped up, it suggested that Bitcoin could have been a solution to current funding problems over at WikiLeaks. This was one of the most popular sites to link to Bitcoin at the time, and as a result, a flood of new traffic came in over the brewing WikiLeaks scandal. It was even reported that right after this article was published, the entire Bitcoin forum went down from the influx of new visitors. Many people chimed in on this thread, gawking at the headline, and even Satoshi made a post that read the following. It would have been nice to get this attention in any other context. WikiLeaks has kicked the hornet's nest, and the swarm is headed towards us. It appears that Satoshi saw an impending threat from the government, as not long after this post, he'd move away from Bitcoin. Satoshi would only make one other update to Bitcoin and would later hand off the project to a man by the name of Gavin Anderson. Something I should explain is that Bitcoin by nature is an open source project, and by this time, there were quite a few people involved. Gavin was a computer scientist that graduated from Princeton, and at the time, he was developing new products for the Bitcoin market. As a result of Satoshi's absence, for a time, he became the spokesman for Bitcoin. After handing off the project to Gavin, Satoshi was still in contact via email for a short while, until one final day. On April 26, 2011, Satoshi would write the following to Gavin. "I wish you wouldn't keep talking about me as a mysterious shadowy figure. The press just turns that into a private currency angle. Maybe instead make it about the open source project and give credit to your dev contributors. It helps motivate them." Satoshi really didn't like the angle of Bitcoin being adopted by criminals, as it posed a risk of him being targeted by the government. Keep in mind, this email was sent 2 months after the Silk Road's launch, and by now, Satoshi had been full aware of what Bitcoin was shaping up to be. After this email, Gavin had informed Satoshi that he was invited to speak at a conference hosted by the CIA, but he never actually replied. And to this day, this is the last known verified correspondence from him.
When I initially started working on this video, I imagined a one-part documentary, but with a topic like this, I really wanted to take my time and slow things down and improve the video polish. The saga that includes this mystery is so extensive that I'd be doing you a disservice by not splitting it into a series to make it easier to follow. There are a ton of implications around the mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto, so I want to cover it in a way that explains the scope of the situation and debunk popular misinformation. In the next video, or videos, we will discuss the events after Satoshi's disappearance and narrow down his online profile much further. With all of that being said, I'll see you in the next episode. This is Barely Sociable. Have a good night.